Give us a sense, in a nutshell, what went wrong? We thought we were headed toward this summit on June 12th. It's all off.
I think the president's team reached the appropriate conclusion that there was not sufficient preparation to have even that first meeting when the North Koreans didn't show up for the scheduled planning meetings. I think this is a prudent step. I think it's likely they will continue. Keep in mind that President Trump has already made substantial concessions to Kim Jong Un to get him to come to this meeting. The first is the meeting itself. Every North Korean leader has wanted to meet with an American president. No American president has ever agreed before negotiations for the obvious reasons that we don't want to reward dictators by giving them the most prominent stage in the world, the White House, in the United States, the dominant world power. The second is the president has reversed his own policy and that of his predecessors who wanted Kim to agree to denuclearize as a precondition to getting into talks. That's now become the objective of talks. That's very significant from their standpoint. So let's all hope that they do resume, but my preference would be to have a prior negotiation and then the presidents come in at the end to seal it rather than have them start.
And perhaps to your point, it's interesting what the response from North Korea was after the president's letter. We're going to quote now from Kim Jong Un. He's the #2 in the foreign ministry, somebody actually I've negotiated with. This is what he said: the first meeting would not solve all, but solving even one at a time in a phased way would make the relations get better rather than making them get worse. We would like to make known to the United States side once again that we have the intent to sit with the United States side to solve problems regardless of ways at any time. So this is not a bellicose statement at all. This is saying we're still open to talking.
Yeah, but it restates one of their principal positions in that this will be done in a phased way over many years. The American position has been it's got to be done right away. In fact, it was a statement by our national security advisor talking about Libya and a one-time deal that I think frightened them a little bit for obvious reasons, given what happened to Gaddafi. I think both sides and both presidents have enough at stake that they will continue this process. What's happening now really is a negotiation, just not directed in person.
It's interesting that you mentioned Gaddafi there as well, and obviously the suggestion from John Bolton that this could be a Libya-type model, which clearly upset the North Koreans. I mean, everybody has a face to save and a presentation to put on and rhetoric to provide back home. I just think some of the comments that Trump has made, the president's made this week as well, in light of China's role in this negotiation, is also quite interesting. Listen to what he had to say this week when he was meeting with the South Korean leader.
I will say I'm a little disappointed because when Kim Jong Un had the meeting with President Xi in China, the second meeting, the first meeting we knew about, the second meeting, I think there was a little change in attitude from Kim Jong Un.
What do you think happened as far as the Chinese-North Korean relationship is concerned and the advice perhaps that President Xi was giving Kim Jong Un?
I think President Trump and his predecessors have placed too much hope in the belief that China will do this for us. That's been the American mantra for many years, certainly all of President Trump's first year in office. In fact, while China's short-term interest in stability in the region is identical to ours, their long-term interest is the very opposite of ours.
Yes.
Our policy is that we want a reunified Korea, a democratic unified Korea, and that's complete anathema to the Chinese. Their long-term interest is not to have a democratic regime with American military forces on their border. We have to recognize that. They're not going to carry our water. They're going to carry their water.
So we can't get it done relying on China. Can we get it done without them? What is the chance here that what really happened is we did not include the Chinese enough in this? They went into that summit, and that actually President Xi may have said to Kim Jong Un, why don't you cool this down?
That may be. More likely, he said, be careful and don't do anything without consulting with us first. I think you're right. China is the large power in the region, and I don't think any agreement will be made that is completely opposite to China's interest. But remember, China has an interest in keeping Kim Jong Un in office, just not being unstable. And the president has now gone on record saying, we'll protect Kim Jong Un. That's a huge plus for China.
Protect the regime.
Which aligns our interests, actually, with China.
With China, absolutely. It's a huge plus from China. It's contrary to American and democratic values that we are somehow going to protect a brutal dictator. I'm not sure how that's going to actually operate, but that certainly is one of China's objectives and surely is one of Kim's.
What happens now What happens now? Do you think we have background negotiations? Because the president also has put himself out on a limb, suggesting that he would meet Kim Jong Un. He would like, I'm sure, the victory associated with seeing North Korea engage in some form of nuclear disarmament here. How does he play it?
Well, I think there will be background negotiations, and I think one of the problems is that the United States has publicized the background negotiations,
yes.
and I think the North Koreans probably would prefer to the contrary. So I think you'll see a continued effort to bring them together, but I repeat my hope, this is a personal hope, and I think many share it, is that we revert to the traditional diplomacy of the negotiations occur at a lower level than the presidency, and when there is some promise of bringing them together, then the presidents come together. That's much more likely to produce a realistic, enforceable agreement than starting off with the president's meeting.
And what about the role of President Moon Jae-in of South Korea? I mean, he really brought this to pass as a practical matter. It looks like we sort of pulled the rug out from under him. He had an emergency meeting in the middle of the night over there in response to this letter. What role does he have to play? How much do we need to really enlist his help?
Well, they're our principal allies in the region along with Japan, and just as North Korea is going to talk with China, we have to keep the South Koreans and the Japanese fully informed and feeling as though they are fully a part of this discussion.
What about the kind of whiplash that's being created here in some sense by the president's actions, his tweeting, the negotiations that either aren't or are going on a lower level initially? In terms of trust in negotiation, I mean, you suggested that the Chinese had said to Kim Jong Un, look, be careful here about what you give up or what you say.
Well, I think there are two contradictory feelings flowing through the world. The first is that President Trump is unpredictable. He changes his mind from day to day, makes contradictory statements all the time, and there's a concern about that. On the other hand, he's the American president and will be for at least 3 more years, and they've got to deal with it. President Moon of South Korea believes obviously the formula is flattery. He's been overflowing in his flattery of the president. Others will take it different ways. I think that's one of the issues they're going to have to deal with.
At some level, do we need all of us to give President Trump some credit here? Because many regimes in the United States have tried to deal with North Korea without much real effect. There has been some change in North Korea by this really tough sanctions approach that he got the UN to go along with, and his talking tough. Has he really made a bit more progress than we've seen before?
Well, I respectfully disagree. We've reached agreements with North Korea before, twice. The problem has been they didn't keep the agreements. So when he gets to the point of reaching an agreement with North Korea, he will then have reached the point that 2 prior presidents already reached, and then the question will be, this time, will they keep their word?
Can I push back there and say this time is different? Because, as David said, the sanctions have been accelerated, that the North Koreans are arguing now that they are a nuclear power. So is there justification on both sides to make this different from the prior 2 situations where the North Koreans didn't follow through? One, because they think they're in a more powerful position, and also because they're backed into a corner over sanctions.
Well, that may be true, and certainly it is the case that they are now a substantial nuclear power. If you believe that's a basis to trust them, I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
But coming back to the approach, whether it's staged or whether it's all in one bite, isn't it almost impossible to do a negotiation where you say you have to give us everything before we give you anything?
Of course.
Which was what John Bolton really said.
Right.
Well, John Bolton went further than that. He just published an article a few months ago suggesting military action against North Korea and military action against Iran. I think both of those were wrong, and I think that's one of the reasons why you have this glitch. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons for it. I think they're frightened about that policy being adopted by the United States.
I mean, the president threatened that this week as well. When he retracted his situation, when he said, look, we're not going to have this meeting, he also said the military stands ready if necessary. So he kind of echoed the John Bolton line on this as well.
Well, I think you want it, understandably, every politician wants it both ways. He disavowed Bolton, but also said we're ready to go militarily.
Let's jump way forward. Assume that actually we could have some sort of negotiations that move forward and it could even move to an agreement. How do you overcome the thing that you identify, which is how do you verify it? How do you possibly know for sure? Because as you say, it's been done twice before and didn't work out so well.
One of the problems the president is going to have when they get to that stage is he has denounced the Iranian agreement as inadequate. And the Iranian agreement included the most intrusive inspection regime in history. How he's going to top that in North Korea is going to be interesting to see and a very difficult question to resolve.
Who's critical now to push this forward? Is it the Chinese relationship with the United States? Because I feel you've kind of pointed out that the sequencing is critical here. We've got tensions between China and the United States over trade. That seemed to deteriorate just in the last week at the same time, in fact, as the negotiations or the talks behind the scenes with China and North Korea also precipitated what we've seen in the last 24 hours. The strategy with China and the United States here feels pivotal.
Well, it has never been as simple as the United States dealing with North Korea alone. Obviously, both sides have regional alliances and allies with whom they must participate in preparation, in planning strategy. For North Korea, it's China. For the United States, it's South Korea, Japan, and others in the region. I think we have to do a better job of listening to and trying to incorporate and accommodate the concerns of our allies in the region,
yes,
just as Kim is obviously doing with the Chinese president. Now, the roles are somewhat reversed. China is much larger and more powerful, and we are the dominant power on our side. But that does not mean that we can not take fully into account the needs and concerns of South Korea and Japan. They are our allies in the region.
And where is Japan in this? I mean, are they rooting for the agreement? Are they concerned? Because they would be the closest in some ways after South Korea if they have missile capability.
Well, I think obviously they would like an agreement that will result in the full denuclearization of North Korea. That would be a huge positive step for their security. I think, though, given their bitter history between the two peoples and the two countries, they're going to be very concerned about making sure that any agreement is fully implemented and verified, as I think we should be concerned given the history of our relations with North Korea.